So we are seeing that being a case manager is a wide-reaching role, where you can have a significant positive impact on the life of an individual. However aspirational it may seem, everything costs money, and we want to know how are case managers funded, and if it can affect how they do their job. So as a case manager, who would usually pay the case manager's wage? Is it something that's done by a NHS or a government organisation, or is it the individual families themselves that pay, or is it both?
It's both, but not at the same time. If you are employed by the NHS, you will have a job description, and that provides that's your remit. But it is quite different, and I've done both. I started off working for 5 years for the NHS in the UK, and then I worked independently for 15, 20 years. When you're working independently, it's much clearer. When you think about it, if you're working with someone who has sustained a traumatic brain injury, it's very often, in legal terms, someone else's fault. Okay, so you've had a car accident, somebody punched you, something happened because of an action of a third party that caused an injury.
Yeah, it's very rarely you'll go out and bash your own head against the wall.
Yes,
Honestly,
yes. I mean, to be honest, it's very, very unusual for a brain injury just to be an accident. It can happen. You can fall off a ladder when you're up on the roof fiddling with a television aerial, which is what happened to a client of mine a long time ago now. But in that case, clearly it wasn't his fault. He didn't mean to do that. It was an accident, genuinely. So he was covered by National Health services. But if it's someone else's fault, then there is a case that could ultimately go to court, and there's money attached to it. So my experience of being a case manager working in England is that I would be appointed in the first instance by somebody representing the client, with normally a solicitor, who might have been running the case and continues as to look after the finances for that person. And a personal injury lawyer in that situation, who's well experienced, will know. He will have got to know his client. He'll know the case managers around, and lots of other people too. And the best practice in solicitors is that they match the case manager with the client. And my experience of that actually is not that I'm ever told there's a budget that you have to stick within, but and I very often didn't know what the settlement was. It's not any of my business, actually.
Between the client
it's yes. Yes. But so what you do is part of your assessment. You that's your initial way of getting to know the client. But of course, part of that is that you're saying, well, what I've discovered and what the family have flagged up is that these issues need to be looked at. The client might be in completely inappropriate accommodation. If there are physical difficulties that there weren't before, maybe you need to look at housing. Maybe they need to move. Maybe it needs to be adapted. Maybe, I don't know, any sort of possibility. But there's a cost attached to that. They may need a whole range of therapies, and I've worked with youngsters with cerebral palsy who need not just speech and language therapy, but AAC input, specialist, alternative and augmentative communication. So you're talking to experts on the communication field at least, and all those have a cost. So your initial assessment report will come, certainly for me, at the end of that. My conclusion is that your client, Freddie, needs a new house, a vehicle, a speech and language therapy, possibly AAC, physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, occupational therapy. We need those therapists to go into school because and so on, and the costs attached to that. Now that goes off to the solicitor, who basically is saying, let me see what you're proposing, and then the family and I will decide whether we want to appoint you. If you send him things and he thinks this woman is completely off her head, and or we haven't got the money for that, well, that begs all sorts of questions. But anyway, good solicitor really would be expecting that you're coming with things that there is already money for, because it's been to court. And
would that not do you ever get asked before something goes to court?
Well,
to
yes,
help generate that request.
Yes, but then you would be acting as an expert witness.
Okay.
Case manager.
And that different to?
It is slightly different. Okay. Yes. Sometimes you can be both.
Mm-hmm.
Following on, you might be the expert witness, case manager, who did the report, who, once the case is settled, the family decide they would like you to continue to work with them.
So do you need a fair knowledge of economics as well then? Because, for example, a house is a house, but there's ongoing costs and upgrading. You mentioned a vehicle, so vehicles don't last forever.
No.
There's stuff like speech and language, so that so when you sometimes hear of newspaper reports of somebody getting a settlement, think that's ridiculous. But if it's for somebody,
a lot of money.
Yeah, but if it's somebody who wants to live the best quality of life for maybe the next 80 years,
absolutely,
that doesn't go very far.
Well, we're all living longer. People with brain injuries have. I was certainly, when I was a student, and it's not changed very much, the life expectancy is no different. So you've got your whole life ahead of you. We're talking about people who probably can't work.
Yeah.
Now, if you start to do a quick sum on what you would have earned in a year, in a lifetime, with all the increments and all the rest of it, lots of money starts to just be put in a different context. If you add to that the things that you've just said, that yes, you might need a vehicle, but not only do vehicles get worn out, but they get upgraded, and the upgrades come with a cost. So that's not actually, I'm pleased to say, that's not the case manager's job to do that sort of economics. That's a different bit of the solicitor's team. But they're all things that have to be looked at and costed, because certainly where I was working in England, you have one bite of the cherry, the solicitor does.
Yeah.
And you have to get it right. And
if you don't,
very hard to get back.
Yeah. If you don't, the person who's suffering is the client, maybe 20 years down the line.
Absolutely. Yeah.